Welcome back. I want to bring in Lisa Bloom and John Burris quickly. Mr. Root, Dennis Root, is still on the stand. Lisa, your impression of this witness so far, it seems that he is willing to answer and comment on any question asked, as if he is the ultimate expert, it seems.
Well, he is a use of force expert, and he's talking about that. But there was a very interesting piece of testimony just a moment ago. I wonder if the prosecution noticed it. The witness said that George Zimmerman is not the confrontational type. He's not the I'm going to get on you type.
Right.
I wonder if that could be opening the door to the prosecution then introducing evidence about George Zimmerman's prior restraining order that his ex-fiancée got against him and the assault on a police officer. That's not allowed in, but the judge said she would consider it if it became relevant. Is that now relevant?
Well, John, what do you think? Is that now relevant? I mean, this witness has gone far beyond what we thought we'd hear from him.
Yeah, I think it's potentially relevant, but I also think that it doesn't give consideration to the fact that he made these statements, calling him an a-hole, he's a suspicious character, they always get away with it. Those are confrontational type words, particularly when he followed him. So this person seems to not, only has a small slice of it. He's really trying to constrict his testimony. Whether or not this opens up, I don't know that it opens up because the defendant himself hasn't made those statements.
Right. And all of these witnesses, and many of them, except for perhaps those who talked about the science of the gunshot wound, and even their credibility, I think, can be put on the table. But a witness like this Dennis Root, who admits that this is the first time he's ever been used as an expert. He knows of the publicity that will come with this case. And he goes beyond any questions on deadly force to questions of demeanor and what someone was thinking and all of these things. It just begs to the question of his credibility.
I mean, frankly, I think this is a problem with the lawyers, both sides, particularly the prosecution. They were supposed to stop this through objectionable testimony, but what they did, they then fed into it and themselves went in and asked all these other questions. So they gave this person an opportunity to answer questions that are way beyond the scope of his expertise, and more importantly, this case. So I think it's a fault of both lawyers here, and not one. The other should have been stopping the other.
So, Lisa, is this a sign that this has run out of gas, that all of the big witnesses we've heard from, we've seen, and that this should be moving, rightfully so, to closing argument?
You know, probably. And what you see with expert witnesses is both sides arguing their entire case through the witness. And so we've seen both of the attorneys now down on the dummy, demonstrating the fight. Interestingly, they've both demonstrated with Trayvon Martin on top and George Zimmerman on the bottom. I would like to see the prosecution demonstrating a number of different positions and angles, because that's more consistent with the prosecution argument. But this is what they're doing with this expert. He's testified as to just about everything in the case, so they're cross-examining about just about everything.
So Root is off the stand now. We believe that the defense has two more witnesses. But just quickly, if we do have the time here in our last few minutes, I'd like to play a little bit of the exchange between the judge and George Zimmerman. Can we play it? Okay, so we're going to get that on tap. But again, that was an extraordinary moment, Lisa, in this case, for us to hear from George Zimmerman and the uncertainty, at least in his mind, as to whether or not he's going to testify.
Right, so let me set it up for you. I mean, in normal criminal cases, and this is so far from a normal criminal case, at the end of the defense case, the defense announces, let's say, that the defendant is not going to testify. And then there's a particular format that the judge goes through in every case where she asks a series of questions to make sure that he knowingly, voluntarily, willingly decided on his own not to testify, that he understands he has the right to, and that he's waived it, he's consulted with counsel, etc. The judge started to go into that. Defense attorney Don West objected to the judge's own questions. She overruled his objections to her questions. She tried to get answers out of George Zimmerman. He didn't seem to know what was going on. It was just an extraordinary
Let me play a little of it for our audience who missed it. Let's play it.
You have the absolute right to remain silent. You do not have to say anything, do anything, or prove anything. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
And you also have the right to testify if you want to. Do you understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
And I've given you an opportunity to discuss with your attorneys whether or not you want to testify in this case, and you have indicated that you have had those discussions?
Yes, Your Honor.
And have you made a decision, sir, as to whether or not you want to testify in this case?
I object to that question.
Okay, overruled. Have you made a decision as to whether or not you want to testify in the case?
I object to that question. I think that's Mr.
Overruled. The court is entitled to inquire of Mr. Zimmerman's determination as to whether or not he wants to testify. Mr. Zimmerman, have you made a decision as to whether or not you want to testify in this case?
No, not at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, and when is it that how long do you think you need before you make that decision?
Your Honor, may we have an opportunity to speak? The case isn't concluded yet.
I understand that, and I've asked Mr. Zimmerman if he needed more time to talk to his attorneys, and if he does, I will afford it to him. Mr. Zimmerman, how much more time do you think you're going to need to discuss this with your attorneys?
I assume it would depend on how long the recesses are, Your Honor. At the end of the day.
Okay, well, if your attorneys have finished with 2 witnesses before the end of the day, do you think that you would then know whether or not you want to testify?
So, John, do you believe that they've not, meaning the defense here, if they've made a decision as to whether or not they're going to bring George Zimmerman on the stand?
I think the lawyers clearly have made a decision, and that decision has been made a while ago. They're just kind of waiting to see how the case unfolds. The problem on it is that, as some have suggested, that the defendant himself wants to tell his story. And if he wants to tell his story, the lawyers are probably trying to dissuade him from doing that. And that's why Don West really is kind of saying, Judge, you should back off here, because we're trying to work through this. You're invading our attorney-client relationship, and you could put the defendant in a position where he feels more pressure to maybe either testify or not testify. So the defense lawyers are in a real quandary here, and I understand that.
Lisa, let me bring you in, because how much of a battle do you believe is going on between George, and I use the word battle, meaning if you have a client who's insisting and who's had the kind of television exposure that George Zimmerman has had, including that interview on Sean Hannity where he even referenced God's will in this.
Right.
This person may deeply believe through religion or whatever else that he is on the side of truth, and he may need to take the stand.
You know what? I'm just skeptical in any high-profile case, because it's always the same. I mean, in the Scott Peterson case, Mark Garagos said, "Oh, he really wanted to testify, but I would not let him testify." Right? I mean, we hear that every time. This case is a little bit different because this is clearly a man who likes to talk. As you say, he gave a long interview to Hannity. He spoke to the police repeatedly right afterwards, gave a long videotaped interview. So it's possible here, but I can guarantee you, if and when he doesn't testify, and I don't think he's going to testify, his attorneys are going to say, "Oh, he really wanted to, but we wouldn't let him." Bottom line is, it's George Zimmerman's decision. The judge had the right to question him about that. She has a legal obligation to ask him about that. And at the end of the day, when we go through this again, she needs to get it clear on the record that it's his decision. The attorneys can recommend, but they don't make that choice. He makes that choice.
Right now on the stand, this is Olivia Bertolin. She is a former resident of the community where George Zimmerman lived and was the neighborhood watch. And her home apparently was broken into while she was home with her baby. And in a police statement, Zimmerman said that it was that incident that prompted him to start the neighborhood watch. Before we listen in, I know that you've ended many of these days, Lisa and John, assessing who had the better day. So far, Lisa, what do you think?
Well, I think the defense did, because this is the defense's case. They put on a decent use of force expert. I think he put on some good evidence. I don't think he was as good as yesterday's expert, Dr. DeMaio, but I think it's a good day for the defense. Not outstanding, but good.
When you say good evidence, what would be good evidence that you could point to specifically? Because I find this person fascinating, down to his ability to comment on any and everything.
Right.
Even down to when he was asked, did you know, or I think Trayvon Martin's actions or something, and the whole group reacted when he answered yes, as if he's a mind reader in addition to being an expert.
No, I agree that he overstepped and that he made some mistakes, and that's why I don't give him, super high marks. But he talked about the fact that 30 or 40 seconds in a fight is a very long time in a fight. That's true. That getting punched in the face can stun you, can knock you out. That George Zimmerman, may not have been capable of fighting at all. These are points that are scores for the defense. That's why the defense put him on.
Okay, that makes sense. And John, your assessment?
Well, my view is that, sure, he made some points for the defense, but I also don't think that he was as great as his verbiage suggests. I mean, he presents well, he talks well, but some of the things he said, I think, were not well founded in evidence, and I think a jury will be in a position to distinguish some of the things he has said. He looks good, but I think in terms of the presentation and actual circumstantial evidence. I don't think it was as great as the defense had hoped.
Right now, the jury has left the courtroom, but we're still listening in to this person who lived in the neighborhood, Olivia Bertolin. She was Zimmerman's neighbor. She was home. Her home was broken in with her child there with her, and Zimmerman says it was that incident that prompted him to start the neighborhood watch. Let's listen in.
Is it correct to say that you and he talked about this approximately 20 times after that?
Probably around there.
I'm sorry?
Probably around that amount.
And you discussed with him the fact that the person had not yet been caught?
I'm sure I did. I spoke to several people about it.
And the person wasn't caught until after you moved out of the retreat at Twin Lakes, right?
He was arrested in December. Then he was released because he was a minor, and he was arrested again after we moved out.
After you moved out?
I believe so. We got a letter after we moved out. I'm not sure the exact date of his arrest.
And another thing that you and George Zimmerman discussed was where you believed, or he believed, that particular suspect lived, right?
I'm sure we discussed that.
And you discussed that he lived near the back entrance of the retreat at Twin Lakes?
Yes.
Again, this is former Twin Lakes resident Olivia Bertolin. Her home was broken into while she was there with her baby, and it was, according to a police statement, Zimmerman's that incident that prompted him to start a neighborhood watch. So obviously, she's speaking a lot about the community and setting the stage there as far as security and the concerns of folks who lived in that area. That does it for this edition of News Nation. Thank you so much for joining us.